Hey guys, welcome back. I'm going to tell you a story today that sounds like something straight out of a really bad military revenge comedy. Except every twisted, ridiculous detail is absolutely true. I came home after 2 back-to-back overseas deployments, the kind of tours that change the maps in your head, only to find absolute strangers sunbathing and swimming right there on my private property. A brand new HOA, or as I came to know them, the Sterling Creek Conservancy, had quietly and illegally seized a huge chunk of my land, built a massive pool and clubhouse, and then had the sheer, unmitigated nerve to tell me, the rightful owner, that I was the one who was trespassing. It was more than just a property dispute. It was a land war initiated against a soldier who was finally just trying to come home. The property, that's where this all starts. I bought it years before I ever set foot in a war zone. Back when it was just a rundown little farmhouse with a porch that sagged like an old man's shoulders, sitting on a good piece of scrubby land outside the sleepy town of Shadow Creek. The realtor called it a fixer-upper with potential, which we all know is realtor speak for. Nobody else wanted it, but it was cheap enough for me to afford on junior enlisted pay and a VA loan. It backed up to the Silver Maple Creek, and I had this simple, beautiful plan. Fix it up over time, rent it out while I was gone, and eventually come back, get out, and turn it into a quiet place where I could just be left alone. No neighbors breathing down my neck, no barking sergeants, no one making me wake up at 0500 unless I wanted to see the damn sunrise with a hot cup of coffee. But life, man, it happens. Deployments stacked up like cordwood, training, overseas rotations, getting sent to places where the biggest threat wasn't always the enemy, but the sheer, mind-numbing fatigue. I wasn't exactly flying home every weekend to mow the lawn, so I paid a local property manager to handle things. They found a couple of long-term tenants, older folks who didn't need fancy, just cheap rent, and the place more or less paid for itself. Years went by like that, and when I finally separated, I had this whole idyllic picture in my head. I'd go home, spend a few months fixing the house myself, maybe start something small. I just wanted my own solid ground under my boots again without sand or people shooting at me. What I did not expect was to turn off the highway and find a colossal, master-planned subdivision where my quiet dirt road used to be. I remember slowing the truck way down and just staring at it. Instead of woods and fields, there were rows of identical houses with identical driveways, perfect little trim trees, speed bumps, children at play signs, and a huge, fancy stone monument at the entrance that read, Sterling Creek Reserve, a deed-restricted community. My stomach just dropped, that cold, familiar empty feeling. I drove a little further, thinking I had to be lost. But then I saw it. My old, cracked driveway was still there, but it cut off from their new main road at this awkward, weird angle, like a vestigial afterthought. On one side, a tidy row of new houses. On the other side was a site that actually made me hit the brake. A massive stucco building with big glass doors, a covered patio, and a gleaming blue swimming pool behind a tall metal fence. There were umbrellas, lounge chairs, a grill area, even a playground. A sign out front read, Sterling Creek Conservancy Community Clubhouse and Pool, residents only. That building sat exactly where my entire back pasture used to begin. For a split second, I honestly thought years of IED concussions had finally scrambled my memory, and I was misremembering the layout of my own damn land. But the driveway curved, following the natural, unmistakable line of the Silver Maple Creek behind everything. No, I knew that land. I had walked every foot of it in the dark, training, dreaming about what I would do when I was finally home and not constantly tired. I knew that land better than any base I'd been stationed on. I drove slowly down my own cracked driveway, weaving between 2 huge SUVs parked halfway across it like they owned the road. At the end, my sad little farmhouse was still there, new roof, fresh paint. Empty and quiet, since the last tenants had moved out a few weeks earlier. I parked, got out, and just stood there, looking back towards that monstrous clubhouse. It stuck out like a sore thumb, practically hugging what I was 99% sure was my property line. You know that feeling when something is deeply, profoundly wrong, but your brain hasn't fully processed the threat yet? I had exactly that. It was like the first time you hear incoming mortar fire. Your body reacts, adrenaline hits, before your mind fully registers the sound. I took a deep breath, walked through the house, dropped my duffel, and went straight out the back door toward the pool. From the rear, it looked even more egregious. The whole pool deck and a good chunk of the building itself appeared to sit squarely on my pasture. The fence ran down to the creek line, then curved back in a way that defied my original survey markers. As I stood there, some kid cannonballed into the pool. The smell of sunscreen and charcoal floated over. Then a woman spotted me through the fence. She narrowed her eyes, put her hands on her hips, and marched over with that patented, self-important suburban swagger. "Excuse me," she called, her voice dripping with officiousness. "This area is for residents only." I raised an eyebrow, still numb. "I own this property." She gave me a quick once-over, taking in the beat-up truck, the faded duffel, and the old unit t-shirt I was wearing. "Uh-huh," she sniffed. "And I'm the Queen of England. This is Sterling Creek Common property. If you're renting somewhere nearby, you need to use your assigned access gate." She pointed dismissively toward the sidewalk. I felt a genuine laugh bubble up, but it came out more like a snort of disbelief. "Pretty sure this is my backyard." "Pretty sure it's not," she snapped back. "The clubhouse is for dues-paying members. You cannot just wander back here because you see a pool. That's trespassing." She didn't wait for a response, already turning away, calling back over her shoulder. "If you have an issue, take it up with the HOA board. We've already had enough law and order types around here." She said law and order types, like she was saying cockroaches. I stood there for another second, watching her rejoin her friends. They immediately started whispering and glancing over, all tight ponytails and smug smiles. One of them looked at my t-shirt, read the old unit name, and made a face like she'd just tasted something sour. All right, I thought, the cold, steady fury starting to set in. This is going to be fun. That was my first meeting with Valerie Thornton, president of the Sterling Creek Conservancy HOA. My second meeting came the next morning, in the form of a note taped to my front door. "Dear homeowner," it began, which was funny, because they still hadn't bothered to find out my name. "As you are aware, Sterling Creek Reserve is a deed-restricted community. You are currently out of compliance in the following areas." It had bulleted items, of course, the unsightly truck, the unapproved flag holder, and landscaping not consistent with community standards. At the bottom was the printed name, Valerie Thornton, HOA President. I leaned against the doorframe and laughed. I had seen some ridiculous stuff in my life, but getting written up for a flag holder while they had a swimming pool sitting on my land, that was truly world-class audacity. I tossed the letter on the counter, grabbed my laptop, and went straight to the county recorder website. It took 10 minutes to pull up my parcel info and the subdivision documents. There it was, my original lot, shaded differently, with a clear note that said, "Excluded parcel, existing single-family residence." The subdivision was wrapped around me, but I was legally untouched. I then pulled up the satellite imagery overlay. The clubhouse and pool sat smack on overlapping parcel lines. My initial visual estimate was confirmed. 70% of their beautiful new amenity was sitting squarely on my land. I took a screenshot and just sat there, staring. While I was overseas getting shot at, they were having board meetings and ribbon cuttings, sinking a whole damn clubhouse partially on land that did not belong to them. The calm, cold place in my brain took over. You can be angry later. Right now, you need documentation. First, I found my original file box. No mention of any HOA in the purchase documents. The survey clearly marked the property line. Next, I called the property manager. He nervously confirmed the developer had assured the HOA everything was fine, and that they had assumed I was unreachable after I didn't respond to the one mailing address they had. They chose to believe the developer and simply act like they owned the whole backstretch. I wasn't mad that they enjoyed a pool. I was absolutely livid that they decided they were entitled to build it on land I paid for with years of my life, without even the decency of a phone call. A couple days later, I filed the original survey and the new documents into a neat folder and walked over to the clubhouse during one of their advertised board meetings. Inside, Valerie was at the head of the table. She saw me and frowned. "This is a private meeting," she said. "Residents only." "I am a resident," I replied. "I own the farmhouse down there." "The old house?" one board member asked. "I thought the developer bought that out." "Nope," I said. "Still mine." Valerie rolled her eyes. "Look, we don't really have time for whatever this is. If you're a tenant, talk to your landlord." "I'm the owner," I interrupted, keeping my voice level. And I think we have a serious problem here with where this building is sitting. Valerie's smile went tight. We had all the proper permits. This clubhouse is community property. It's not up for debate. I laid the old survey and the new map on the table, side by side. According to the county, I said, tapping the lines, your building and pool are about 30% on HOA land and 70% on mine. A beat of silence. One older board member picked up the survey. This shows the original parcel lines. This section here, that's where the deep end is. He looked up at Valerie. Valerie, did we ever get a recorded deed for that section? She bristled. The developer said it was included. We voted on it, and people paid dues for this. Well, voting doesn't trump recorded deeds, I said simply. She turned on me, her voice rising. Maybe where you came from, yelling solves everything. But here, we handle things peacefully. This is not the army. You don't just barge in and throw papers around because you think you're right. I blinked. I hadn't yelled. You're being aggressive, she insisted, glaring at my unit t-shirt. This is exactly why some of us have objected to having military people in this neighborhood. Guns, trauma, that whole vibe. This is a family community. I've been back for 3 days, I said. I've done nothing but unpack and cut the grass. Well, now you're trying to steal our pool, she snapped. I don't care what some old piece of paper says. The board approved this clubhouse. The developer told us. The developer does not own my land. I cut in. Never did. He wrapped his subdivision around it. She crossed her arms. If you want to claim this is your land, get a lawyer. Until then, you stay off the pool deck unless you pay dues like everybody else. And take that flag down, by the way. This is not a military base. I looked at her for a long, quiet moment. Good talk, I said finally. I'll take your advice. I picked up my papers and left. I did not take the flag down. Instead, I took her advice about the lawyer. I found Mr. Alistair Kincaid, a property attorney recommended by another veteran, calm, precise, the kind of person who could probably read tax code without falling asleep. He confirmed it immediately. They've really stepped in it. This is a classic case of trespass and permanent encroachment. My options were clear. Sell the land at fair market value, force them to remove the massive pool and building, or sue for damages and unjust enrichment. I'm not feeling charitable, I told him. Thought you might say that, he smiled. Then we do this right. First, a new survey to confirm the lines. Then we quietly gather every record we can. Permits, HOA minutes, emails, anything that shows who knew what and when. If they're smart, they'll panic and settle. If they're dumb, we let them keep digging. How patient are you? He asked. I thought about nights sitting in dusty rooms waiting for go time, months away from home and years cut into choppy pieces. I can do patient, I said. The new surveyor came out a week later. He confirmed it all. The rear edge of the pool, half the deck, utility lines, and a 10-foot corner of the clubhouse were all on my property. He shook his head. Someone ignored something. This wasn't a mistake. While Mr. Kincaid dug into their records, I played nice. I ignored the endless stream of ridiculous violation notices Valerie kept taping to my door. Parking, grass height, unapproved flag. I filed them all away. She treated me like a war crime in cargo shorts, but I was just the quiet guy fixing his porch, waiting for go time. One afternoon, I came home to find Valerie standing in my front yard, hands on hips, staring at my flag. We have specific guidelines for flags, she started. You cannot just hoist whatever you want because you feel patriotic that day. It is my house, I said, and that flagpole was here before your HOA existed. She pursed her lips. Violence is not an excuse to break the rules. Some of us chose peace. I don't see why your personal history should give you special treatment. You mean my service? I mean your job, she snapped. We don't support what you people do. It upsets some of the children. Maybe teach them what it means instead of being scared of some cloth, I said, my voice dangerously even. You're being hostile again, she shouted, actually writing something on her clipboard. You know, some veterans struggle to adjust. I have research articles. You cannot just move in and intimidate people into letting you do whatever you want. I smiled, slow, cold, and unfriendly. You're absolutely right, Valerie, I said. I cannot intimidate anyone into anything. I pointed towards the clubhouse. But lawyers can. She blinked. What's that supposed to mean? You'll see, I said, walking inside and shutting the door. Inside, I finally let myself grin, because Mr. Kincaid had just emailed me copies of the HOA minutes. They knew there was a boundary question from the start. The developer had assured them everything was fine, and their own attorney had warned them in a memo that any encroachment would need to be resolved with the owner. They had gone ahead anyway, because the buyers wanted a pool. Mr. Kincaid drafted a demand letter that made my military planning look half-hearted. It laid out everything, both surveys, the permits, the board minutes, stating they had built in knowing disregard of clear property records. The letter gave them two options. Option 1, remove the entire structure and pay damages, or Option 2, negotiate a purchase of the encroached land at 3 times fair market value, plus all my legal fees, damages, and a permanent easement fee. If they refused, we would sue for trespass and name individual board members personally. The next week was entertaining. Valerie showed up on my porch, pounding on the door half an hour after the email hit. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, waving the letter. "Are you insane? You cannot sue an entire neighborhood because you want more grass." "Morning, Karen," I said, leaning against the frame. "I want you off my land. How you do that is up to you. You knew about this for months and you waited until now," she screamed. "That's sneaky. That's like something you would do in a war." "You mean planning?" I said. "You built a pool in my backyard while I was deployed." I countered, cutting her off. She took a step back, clutching the letter. "You're going to be responsible for kids losing their pool. Do you want that on your conscience? Didn't you already do enough damage overseas?" There it was, I thought. "Talk to your lawyer, Valerie," I said quietly. "I'm done talking on my porch." Then I closed the door in her face. A week later, the lawsuit was filed. The HOA's lawyer tried every angle. Adverse possession, implied consent because I wasn't there to stop them, but the fact that their own internal minutes warned them, and they built anyway, destroyed every defense. The best part was the depositions. Valerie, under oath, dug her own grave. When asked why they hadn't contacted me before construction, she stated, "We tried. He was off doing military things. We were not going to reward that by bending over backwards." This community voted for peace and family values. The court reporter noted her words perfectly. We ended up in a mediation room. On one side, me and Mr. Kincaid. On the other, Valerie, 2 other board members who looked like they regretted every life choice, and their clearly exhausted attorney. The mediator got straight to it. The surveys and records show the clubhouse and pool encroached significantly on Mr. Ethan's property. He is entitled to a remedy. Valerie nearly choked when Mr. Kincaid slid our settlement demand across the table. 3 times their appraised value, plus all fees. "That is extortion," she hissed. "It is compensation for years of trespass and for giving you the luxury of not having to rip this thing out of the ground," Mr. Kincaid stated calmly. "We don't have that kind of money. We would have to levy a huge special assessment. People will lose their homes," cried one board member. Valerie glared at me. "You're a soldier. You have benefits. Why do you need this money?" I looked her dead in the eye. "Because it's mine, Valerie. And because you decided my land was your playground." They stepped out to argue. We could hear Valerie's voice the loudest, screaming about principle, the others arguing about bankruptcy and liability. 15 minutes later, they came back in. "We can agree to your terms," their attorney said, defeated. We agreed to structured payments over a couple of years, secured by a lien on the HOA's common funds. They paid my legal fees up front, and crucially, they agreed in writing to cease all enforcement actions against me and acknowledged that my parcel was not and had never been subject to their covenants. I walked out of that mediation feeling lighter than I had in years. HOAs don't have magic money trees. Every dollar they spent came from the homeowners. And when the board sent out the notice about the special assessment to resolve legal issues related to common amenities, people were furious. They had no idea their clubhouse sat on my land. They had no idea the board had been warned years ago and ignored it. Someone leaked excerpts from Valerie's deposition onto the neighborhood Facebook group, her ranting about military types. There was a recall vote for the board before the week was out. The recall passed with 80% of the votes. Valerie was removed as HOA president and from the board entirely. A couple months later, I saw her moving out. One of the neighbors quietly told me she couldn't swing the special assessment on top of her already stretched mortgage. Between the legal mess and the fact that half the neighborhood now saw her as the reason their dues had doubled, she was done. As for me, I put the settlement money to good use. First, I paid off the last of my mortgage. That alone made the whole mess worthwhile. Second, I fixed up my place properly, got a proper flagpole anchored in concrete with lighting that would have given Valerie a stroke. Third, and this was the part that made me smile the most, I turned their mistake into something useful. Since the land under the clubhouse was technically mine until they finished paying, Mr. Kincaid pointed out I had the right to grant temporary licenses for its use. So, I made a few phone calls. Within a few months, on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, the Sterling Creek family-friendly non-military clubhouse hosted a free support group for local veterans. Once a month, we did a cookout for vets and their families. Turns out there were more veterans in those cul-de-sacs than Valerie would have liked to admit. A couple of them told me privately they had kept their service quiet because of comments she had made over the years. Now, their kids splashed in the same pool while their parents swapped stories and grilled burgers. That's the ultimate victory, turning her prejudice, her arrogance, and her million-dollar mistake into a place of community and healing. So, tell me in the comments below, when you first saw that pool sitting on your pasture, what would have been your very first move? Would you have grabbed the tractor chain? Or would you have done what I did and picked up the phone? And do you think Valerie deserved to lose her house over the special assessment, given that she caused it? Let me know your thoughts. I'm curious if the rest of you would have been as patient as I was. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this story of legal revenge, and subscribe for more wild tales from the front lines of property ownership. Thanks for watching.